right. So welcome to the new BEEHOME stream of the day. This is the third one today. And this one is about growing and learning your craft by making webcomics. The people in this stream with me. So I'm Isabel Manalson again. I'm going to be your host forever. Just get used to me. I'm the author of Namesake and also one of the editors at Hiveworks. Specifically the lead editor at Hiveworks, actually. I should just use my actual title. With me today we have returning again Misha Krivanek, who is the author of Alice in the Nightmare. Ellen Kramer, so first stream for Ellen, who is the author of Parisa, and also returning Alison Shaw, who is the author of several comics, including Tigress Queen, Far to the North, and our best-selling book, Persephone. So all very good creators, all very good books. Reminder, if you're tuning in on Twitch, if you scroll down below the viewing window, there's a couple of links to some interesting stuff that's kind of going on in Hiveworks right now. So we have a sale in our store. You can save 10% with the code SPRING2020 and get the aforementioned Book of Persephone yourself and check it out. It's pretty great. Right now we have the Alice in the Nightmare Book 1 Kickstarter running. So that's Misha's book, which is a coming-of-age story about a young girl in Wonderland who is learning to be a dream collector because dreams are the source of power for Wonderland. And it's got nightmares and romance and adorable new friends and badass queens, so you should definitely check that out. And we also have...
Weird magical college story.
Weird magical college story, definitely that. We also have the Among Us Kickstarter running. That's like a romance story around the theme of music. It's beautiful. It's great. Definitely check it out. And if you want to know what streams we're having tomorrow, so we have 2 more streams in this 8-stream lineup that are going to run tomorrow at 1 and 3 o'clock. If you want to follow up, and that's 1 and 3 o'clock Eastern time. If you want to follow and see what happens, you can follow us on Twitter. Be sure to also check the Iron Circus Twitter as well, because Spike and Amanda are also having a bunch of streams going during the weekend to sort of replace Emerald City. So definitely tune into that as well. That's it for the preamble. Oh, I forgot. If you tune in later or the stream drops or anything happens, we are uploading this to YouTube. So if you miss any part of this, you can revisit it, like it, share it, save it, keep it close to your heart. It's all good. So let us begin. The theme for this stream is growing and learning your craft by making webcomics. This is a very common sort of topic, especially for young creators, because a lot of people essentially learn on the job as they're starting a webcomic, and they don't necessarily have comic writing experience. They don't necessarily are doing this professionally at first, but sometimes your comic does well, and then you're like, oh no, I've accidentally backwards stumbled into success. What do I do now? And a lot of people start off also not necessarily with shorter works, but just straight off the bat, like with a long quest. So like you gotta sort of learn on your feet a lot when you're doing that. And even if it's like not your first comic, in my case, Namesake is my first long form comic, and before Namesake I did a few graphic novels. So my experience was like fully limited to like short comics and like comics that were about 80 pages. Like it was graphic novels, but the European format. So pretty short. And then I had to switch to long form. I'm bored. Let's make a webcomic. Yes, indeed. That is what the chat's throwing at me. That is indeed how it works sometimes. So it was my first experience really like writing something on an almost daily basis and sort of working with that. And a lot of people that are a part of this chat, their webcomic was either their first webcomic or their first webcomic was a version of what they'd done, and they decided to reboot one or several of their comics to essentially sort of like improve the story and work on that and sort of integrate things that they've learned. Alison Shaw, for example, who is part of this stream, has rebooted their comic Tigress Queen, and Misha has rebooted their main comic, which is Alice in the Nightmare. Ellen, I can't remember if you actually rebooted Parisa?
Yeah, it actually started in 2007. It was kind of a joint project with my best friend. We tried actually making comics together a total of 3 times, and those fell through, maybe even 4. And we realized that we just worked together style-wise, narrative-wise. And then after a while, I just wanted my own project, so I just picked it up. He was just like, "Yeah, go ahead, yours."
That's like a really good way to sort of segue into what I first want us to talk about. I was wondering if you could each sort of present like the initial sort of like genesis of the first idea and what you learned from that first idea, and then why you decided to sort of move into a second like version.
Yeah.
Since you already started, Ellen, I don't know if you want to like sort of just keep running with that and sort of finish that thought process.
Oh, yeah, that'd be fine. So I've tried to make many long form comics before without ever actually thinking ahead of what I was going to do with them. I just got, I was a teenager and I was just really excited. Like, I want to have a webcomic. I want to have these characters that I can do whatever I want with, and a dumping ground for jokes that come up. And I think the first webcomic I ever tried to make was something with Sonic the Hedgehog fan character back 2000.
Yeah, Sonic.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was a Sonic fan, but that went nowhere because I didn't like the process of how I was doing it. I ran out of ideas, and that dropped. And I tried again. I tried doing another one with my best friend, and it was called Hopeless Fantasy. That went on for a bit until we realized, oh, there's actually more to storytelling than this, and I should probably, plan ahead. And that's where I kind of learned a lesson in. That was like one of my earliest lessons in doing long form, because I always want to do long form, but there comes the surprise after the initial excitement that, oh, you're not. There's a lot more work ahead of you, and you're going to have to do something about that, or you're going to drop it. And that was
when you write this giant quest, and you're like, man, I've drawn 800 pages, and I'm like 1/10 of the way. Fuck.
Well, I didn't get to 800 pages. I got to 14 or 17. The first when we did Carissa together, that was planned out a little more, but it was birthed from a joke about playing a really bad platformer where the first enemy was like a bird and it flies into a fan. And we just kept elaborating on this dumb joke until we came up with something. And I thought, oh, I would actually like to comment about that. And I threw in Nolan. He wasn't even named that then. The main character, one of the main characters of the comic. He was originally just a Klonoa fan character that I drew for fun. Because if you know me at all, one of my favorite games is a PS1 game called Klonoa Jordan Phantomile, which is very, very cute and fun, and also will break your heart.
Misha, do you want to go now? Talk a bit about how you started the first Alice, and then sort of just like decided to
my journey with all that.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, the whole journey. I mean, I know part of that journey because I was part of that, but
you were involved for a lot of the latter half. So to age myself immediately, I am 24 now, and I started Alice when I was 19, or the current version of Alice that is up online today. The genesis for Alice actually started when I was 14, and in my room drawing as was my wont, and just listening to the radio, and Pink's Funhouse came up on the radio, and I was like, oh, this is fun, let me just doodle a character. And that was the first time I drew Alice, and I just kept on drawing her, and I was like, oh, she's cool. I had previous fan OCs from like middle school, from like when my friends, we would all find an anime and then like pick an anime boyfriend and like make his girlfriend for them, middle school stuff, which was really fun. But I just kept drawing this character, and eventually I drew like more characters, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And this also kind of ties into the fairy tale stuff that we were talking about the other day. In that I didn't really set out to pick Alice in Wonderland as something that I would adapt. It was more like I kind of fell backwards into it, where I started doing more research and I was like, how can I make this more accurate to the story, or like in the spirit of it. And I just sort of fell in love with the story of Alice, and I wanted to adapt it well. But the problem was, by the time I was like ready and willing to make this a comic when I was in college, because I had gone through high school like reading webcomics like Sister Claire, Monster Pulse, Namesake was, I loved Namesake in high school. I still do. Duh. I wouldn't be here if I didn't like love webcomics. But I wanted to do one of my own. But the problem was I was a bad editor and I didn't get rid of anything. It was real bad. And when I actually started, it was just like, oh, shit, this is a lot. And I don't know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I actually recall when you sent me the file that described every segment to the story. Every chapter essentially switch.
It could have been like a graphic novel of its own.
Yeah, every chapter was just a different genre, which I think was the point, because the point was that the characters would sort of be like hopping from dream to dream, but it was like almost too literal. I was just like, everything is basically exposited because you have no time for the characters to sort of breathe and go through stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It was really strange, and there are still like, I'll still go back, like as you do when you find like old stories you've written and be like, oh, that was a pretty cool element, maybe I'll use that for a later thing.
Yeah, definitely mine the 24 different stories for stories.
Yeah, like if you're a young creator right now, save everything. For the love of God, save everything, because it's going to be A, really fun to go back and look at what you've done, and B, free gold mine for you to like find old ideas and try to incorporate them with how you know now. You're never starting over. You're never starting like from scratch. You're starting with experience. Every time you start, like you start a new thing. Okay, advice out of the way. And so then when the shit hit the proverbial fan and it was just like, oh, this is bad. Issa was the one who stepped up and was like, hey, you can either go on with your story as it is now, or we can take it off and I'll work with you and we can reboot it. And that ended up being the godsend that I needed. And then we worked for a few months to get the story really going, and Issa helped me out a lot with the first chapter. And then eventually about around chapter 2 of the comic going, so I was still like writing everything as chapter 1 and chapter 2 were going, but around the middle of chapter 2 was when I really figured out like, oh, this is where I want this to go. Oh, this is what I want to say with this. And it ended up being a much, much, much stronger story in the end. And I'm very happy with where it is now.
It also gave you the breathing room to sort of like evolve visually.
Oh, definitely.
Let's move on to Allie's story. And Allie, just, I don't know if you're seeing the chat, but there's some people mentioning that they used to read Tigress Queen original flavor on tapas.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be perfectly honest. That old version, that was the second version of my comic. I'm on the third.
No, betrayal.
I made 10 pages of like the actual original, and I'm not even going to say where I posted them originally. I like took them down since, but like it was so bad. It's like I can't show this to people. Like I was using a borrowed version of Photoshop and was brand new with a tablet. So like, you know, not only is the art bad, but like I have no experience with a tablet, so it's like extra bad. And I had no idea how to like do the layouts or anything like that, so it was just kind of a mess. So like,
but you were very attached to the characters because you came back to them like 3 times.
Yeah, I've been attached to these characters for like a long time, but I also have like a million characters, oh my god, like in stories that I've never even touched digitally. So like whenever I'm done with my current comics, I can literally just like open up this one old book and like flip a page, pick something new, and like pick that up. But anyway, specifically, like I was in my my last year of college. It was my last semester, and I had to quit my job to take an internship the previous semester, and like now that was over, I didn't have time to find a new job before I was planning on moving away. So no one's going to hire me for one semester of college. So it's like, what am I gonna do with my time? Hey, why don't I try making that webcomic again? So I did not go to art school. Like I again, like still had no idea what I was doing. And
I hear that.
I feel like I feel like in this chat only Misha had the benefit of going to art school.
Yeah, I am very, very lucky.
Fancy. So yeah, like it wasn't until Farther North got onto Hiveworks and Isa pulled me aside and she's like, "Hey, do you need an editor? Because like I think you might need an editor." I'm like, "Oh yes, please, thank you." And she pointed out that, like,
what really kind of like struck me about your story is that the characters were like very alive ensemble cast, but like because of the paneling and like the pacing, it was really hard to sort of get attached to them. It was like, I really want to like these people,
sure.
But there's like this invisible force field keeping me from getting there.
There was a big problem where I was trying to like speed run through the story without even realizing it. And Isa also pointed out that like, oh, like, you know, we do like treat it like it's a camera and we're following rules of cinematography, and I'm like, what are those? And just looking up cinematography, I have a whole like desk full of textbooks now based on cinematography and figure drawing anatomy, the framed ink series, and let's see, story, like I have so many storyboarding books, and like I've essentially just treated Far to the North as my 4-year degree in visual storytelling.
But you can really see like the learning curve, like the last pages of Far to the North when you have the character meet the troll character and just like the final showdown with like the bad guys that are currently there. Like the paneling compared to the early pages is just so, like, it's so good. Like you can really you treated it as like a crash course, but like you can see the results right away. And I also find that like that process definitely influenced positively the Tiger's Queen reboot and Persephone.
Yeah, it was because I had improved so much that like I finally decided like, okay, I hate reading my own comic now. Like I loved Far to the North and I liked how it looked at that point, but TQ was so hard for me to go back and read, and it's like, I can't do this anymore, I need to start it over. And some people were like, whoa, but what, how about you just like keep the new pages coming and like just go back and redraw the old pages? And it's like, that's not what this is. This is a complete redo. Like I have to go back and do the things that I originally wanted to do, but was rushing through because I was just in such a hurry to get the story out. So yeah, like I learned to take my time and like just pause and give breathing room, like you've mentioned a couple of times, and I feel like it has improved immensely.
I feel like if you're a bunch of newbies sort of learning how to do comics, or even people who have like like industry experience in animation and all that, and you're sort of learning to use a new medium. Personally, what I've seen as an editor, usually the flaws come from three parts. It's either like one of those parts the person really doesn't like have a grip on, and that's what's like calling this down, or all three are kind of weak, and it's like a combination. I sort of see it that like the first issue that I see that's very common is the interaction between the narrative space and the visual space, like how the dialogue is meshing with the image. If the person is deciding to actually show things in the image, like we were talking in the romance panel about how, like, if you want to showcase like desire or romance, you can do it visually instead of just using, dialogue. So how things are meshing, if the person is using dialogue too much or too little, and if it's working with the art. So that's definitely like point one a lot, I find. Point two is obviously, paneling. Because paneling is a huge weakness for a lot of people, because there's not really like a way to learn paneling naturally. Like Ali was saying, part of mastering paneling is knowing cinema techniques, but a panel in the comic is not necessarily a cinematographic frame either. Like, it can't transition, so it's almost like a theater scene as well. So it's partially theater, partially cinema, and partially page design as well, because the panels form, like, whether you're looking at a comic that's a scroll down comic like on webtoons, or you're looking at a complete page, there is page design that goes into the flow. So it's like partially graphic design too, and that's a lot of components to learn on the fly, and a lot of people don't necessarily like master them as well as they'd want to. The last element that I feel is sort of lacking is a creator sort of understanding the themes of the story. Because a lot of people, they start a story and they're like, I'm gonna make this a super long ass quest, and you talk to them and you realize there's nothing thematic they're really trying to achieve. They're mostly just copying what they love without necessarily understanding why they love it. Like when you have someone that writes a YA novel and you're like, okay, so clearly you did this because Harry Potter is your shit. But like, what are you trying to say? Like, you specifically.
I feel you're calling me out right now.
This is a call out, Ellen only.
Yeah.
So it's sort of this idea of like when you're going through something and you have creators kind of taking bits and pieces of things they love and creating sort of this Frankenstein creature that's not necessarily bad. Like, that's the thing too. Creating something without necessarily thinking about theme doesn't necessarily mean you create something bad. You can create something that's very successful without really diving into like the book reporty part of it. But often it's people are supporting you in the chat. I'm bullying you, Helen. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I do have some things to say about that.
Yeah, if you want to pick it up. But yeah, it's basically these three things I feel are kind of the three big lacking things. And I feel like everybody in this chat is like assigned to a specific one. Like Ellen just said, I'm being called out. The theme one is me. And I kind of feel like Ali's biggest one was definitely like the staging and the paneling. And like Misha was definitely like the balancing between story and art. So like, let's talk about how you sort of met, like how you realized that you had this weakness, how you sort of met the challenge, and how you feel you basically bested it or mastered it to an extent.
It's not so much the challenge I've overcome when it's specifically one thing. A thing I want to mention is that I have ADHD, and I mean, a lot of artists are going to say they have ADHD, and they do. You know, they're not joking about that. But what it entails is that the name is really misleading, and people say you have a hard time standing still or paying attention. And no, it's not. It's how we process information, and how we process information is integral to how we learn and interact with the world. Unfortunately, I can't regulate my attention, and so everything is coming at me at once, and that results in me either freezing or retreating back to things that I'm familiar with. And so the reason I was really excited to talk about the whole growing and learning your craft making webcomics was because I can book learn adequately enough, but I am actually very bad at studying. I went to grad school, I became good at school, but I actually didn't become very good at studying. I didn't really even understand what the point of essays were until
It's basically the difference between gaining knowledge and and basically being part of a system, like going through the cogs of the system or actually acquiring knowledge.
Yeah, and that's the thing you're supposed to learn in college, is how to learn. I mean, that's what a PhD is. It's to say, hey, you've come with the skills to learn this thing. Well, that's not what I was doing. And so I try to sit down, I try to study, I say, okay, I need to work on my anatomy, I need to do this. But it's very, very hard unless there is a target. It's like playing a person who likes to play games that are very clear rules. They're put in an open world game, they don't know. And that's kind of how I often feel. There's so many things that I want to do and tackle. And so the only way I can do that is by doing. And so I told myself, when I started this comic, because I had a big problem with looking back, I would tell myself, you cannot redo past pages. Well, I broke that rule because there were some exceptions to that rule. There was one that I was worried would be interpreted as ableist, so I had to change that. And I still want to go back and redo the whole first chapter, because I've learned so much about readability. I've learned so much about paneling. I draw on a bigger scale now. Things are much more clear. And I want to change that, not because, oh, the art doesn't look good. Is the reader really going to grasp what I'm trying to convey? Because I didn't know that when I first started. And what keeps me moving forward is the idea that you're going to mess up. You're going to make something that's going to be not great, but when you come out of it, it's going to be amazing. And then from then on, you just keep going. And you can look back and say, hey, I grew a whole lot from here. So yeah, as I go along, I am tackling these things. I think about things that Issa had said to me about, because she had said that I asked if I was an animation, and I was actually very flattered. I said, no, I'm actually self-taught. I have a background in psychology. And then they said, oh, okay, because a lot of animators make this mistake. Like, oh, okay. But
I mean,
no,
it's still technically a compliment. Like, it means...
No, it is.
Yeah.
I understand, but I took that in stride. I don't take these things personally. I like when people can say, hey, because no one's gonna sit there and critique your stuff constantly. I mean, some people do, but those people tend to not actually have anything that great to contribute. Some just kind of look for things to complain about. And what it is I want my story to be easily read. I want it to be read efficiently. I want people to look at this and think this is easy to get into.
You want people to really connect to the material, and that's where the psychology degree shines through.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I've had characters I put in here that I've written at various points in my life. When I was in grad school, I was actually incredibly depressed. Surprise! And I was in a pretty dark place. I ended up writing a character that was, I was exploring that part of that depression that I was experiencing, in addition to what I was actually learning about it, how this depression worked. I see a lot of people making jokes about like neurotransmitters, like, got to get that serotonin. Mom says it's my turn for the serotonin molecule, but it's like, yeah, you gotta kind of a grasp of how it kind of works, but there's so much. I mean, that's just with anything. There's so much out there, and I guess with another struggle you get when you're learning, making these things, is that it opens a whole new world to you. Now you have to figure out what goes in it and what doesn't go in it, because you kind of want to put everything in it.
Yeah, I absolutely feel you on all that. Speaking of like, you just reminded me with the talk about like what was it, like redoing a page to make the readability better. So for, as I've said, the first chapter of Alice, Issa helped me out a lot with that, but I was also like not that experienced with paneling or storyboarding or anything of that nature. So the first interaction between Alice and her guardian, the Red Queen, it was fine, but in making the first book, I one of the things that I wanted to put on my list was to change that scene so that the cinematography could be read better, and how much power that this woman has over, excuse me, how much power this woman has over Alice's fate.
Yeah,
and her
I noticed like
situation.
right away in the new version, and I just like I saw that when we were setting up the book because I spent hours on those pages. How like all the current panels of the first scene with the queen, she's always on the right side of the panel and slightly elevated, which like in cinema language means she's dominating.
Yeah, exactly. And in a readability sense, how in like Western comics you read left to right. Alice is trying to go left and she's trying to go forward with her life, and the queen is like the big obstacle that she has to get through in order to like move on with her life. And in a scene in chapter 6, which is currently being updating on, well, it's currently on the site right now, and I'm working through that. In going back to visit the Red Queen and going back to like, visit with her and check in how everything's doing, she's going to the left, so she's regressing in her life a little bit. So it's like that kind of stuff that you learn and pick up on the way. Just like, it's really one thing I really love about webcomics and like long form comics is that it's on a journey with you in your growth and your knowledge, and all these little nuggets of like cinematography and learning anatomy and learning like staging and symbolism and like efficiency and paneling, is that you just like absorb everything like a sponge, and then just outcome just improve comics. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and there's sort of like, I think it's important at this point in the chat, sort of the midpoint, to sort of underline that if this is not knowledge you have starting out as a creator, like it's not a bad thing. You shouldn't let this stop you.
No, never.
Obviously,
find out what you don't know.
Yeah. It's by doing it that you're like, oh shit, I know nothing. Mm-hmm. That's like part of the process. But like it is like learning on the job. It's sort of like, it's like Jake the dog says, the first step to like achieving something is failing at it.
Exactly. The first step towards being halfway decent at something, or sucking at something, is a step towards being halfway decent at something. I've talked to a classroom of kids, and that is the quote that I use all the time, because these are like 10th graders, and they're like, oh, I don't know how to draw, or I'm not confident in my drawing, I'm not confident in my writing. Like, yeah, you're gonna suck. I'm just honest with them. You were gonna suck at this first. Everyone sucks at it first. Even if you feel you're very gifted at it, you really enjoy it.
Yeah, and even if you've been doing it for a while, you're gonna suck. Like, I've been doing Namesake for like 10 years. Straight up, my job is to go up to people and say like, these are the problems with your comic, and I still draw pages and go like, yep, that sucks, and then like I just ink it and finish it and post it and just like live with it, because
that's all you really can do at that point.
Yeah, at some point you have to accept. And there's also like another thing that I sort of wanted to point out is like, as you absorb this stuff like a sponge and you start preparing to like use it, your brain kind of forces you to analyze it. So in the periods of time where you're like integrating this knowledge in a very subconscious way, you're gonna feel like everything you do is garbage. Like if you're
Yes,
going,
I was just about to say, like the learning curve of like absorbing a thing, and your eye will always be trained better. Your hands are behind your eyes constantly, in the learning curve. Like as you learn and absorb, you'll start to recognize what you can improve on before your body and your hands catch up.
yeah,
That's
and you're not even that necessarily sure about what is like your brain is saying like this sucks, and like the emotional part of your brain, because your hands can't follow yet, is going like, you're right, I do. But like, so it's like this weird sort of like grief period that you have to go through before you level up every time, and suddenly you patch through and you're like, wow, actually I'm amazing, I'm so great, god, I love me. Like it's this,
yeah, one of the things I really learned from art school and in like learning processes is you gotta be uncomfortable before it gets better. The little bit of temporary, I hate this, I don't want to be here, is a sign that things are going to get better. And even when when I was working with Issa on the Alice and the Nightmare cover, even just like meetings and like going through notes and everything, I still had that nugget in the back of my brain that was like, abort mission, get out of here, go. It sucks, but just sticking with it and knowing that this temporary uncomfortable feeling is going to go away and you will be left with something cool and that you're proud of.
my
Just
favorite
hanging on to
thing
that.
about that feeling is that I see it as like a mentor figure. So sometimes I'm trying to help artists with stuff like this, and they're so mad at me, but they don't know why. Like they're so pissed. Like we're doing a meeting and I'm like, okay, these are the things you have to improve.
It's a
And
shot to the ego, to be honest.
yeah, the shot to the ego,
definitely.
and they're like fighting me on this. Like it's like a little battle, and sometimes they lash out, and I'm like, all right, you're just going through this, it's fine. And then 2 months later, you're like, wow, you're right, I had to change all of this, and I did it, and I'm really happy with this. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, I'm sorry for being a jerk, and I'm like, it's cool, I get it. Like when people make comments about my stuff, I have the same. Like I have a very old story about my own growth. My boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband, because I've always inked traditionally, and I was sort of inking stuff, and we've only been dating for like 7 months at that point in time, and he just like and at the time he was actually drawing a webcomic, which he doesn't do anymore, so like it's like we switched places, and he just made a comment of like, well, you know, your art would be better if you like actually varied the size of your lines. And he was saying something because at the time I drew really, really manga style. And he was like, well, you know, it's not going to be interesting if you just copy. And so my immediate reaction after that was like, I'm going to show that bastard. I'm going to improve so hard. He's going to like kiss my ass. And this is the person I was dating. Just like great attitude to have in a relationship. But like he made that comment. So for 6 months, I just practiced really hard to sort of like vary the line and make a very like distinct visual identity, and I sort of like struggled and then achieved it. And this was like years before Namesake. And then 6 months later I was like, look at this, what about that? And he was like, why are you showing me this? Like he didn't even remember, but I was like driven by this for 6 months, like, that's right, cocksucker, look at this.
So you shouldn't be motivated by revenge.
Yeah, because the people you're trying to have revenge on, they don't remember like any of it.
I mean, whatever motivates you. I mean, I can't personally, I can't personally motivate myself with revenge because it's just way too stressful. And I have kind of again, the ADHD thing is that we have incredibly loud emotions, and so it's just like, hey, okay, just take it easy, pace. That said, you know, I did feel a little bit of a pang when Issa had pointed out, like, ask me questions. Say, why are you doing this in your comic? Why are they doing this? And then I was...
Yeah, immediately defensive.
Well, that's the funny thing the brain does.
Yeah.
Is it comes up with excuses. A psychology thing, I guess. You walk into a room, you forget why you come, and you're like, why did I do this? Oh, it's to get this. Well, was it really to get that, or was your brain just filling in the blanks? And sometimes it happens when we're working. Our brain fills in the blanks, but those blanks are just blanks to the people reading.
Yeah, there's
One
there's
very
definitely
useful thing that did come up. Sorry.
no, you go. I like the whole like blanks or not blanks to people reading. We'll have to circle back to that.
Okay.
So like again, I didn't go to art school, but I did have several design classes in college, and one thing that did come up and remained useful was be very willing to defend any choice you make in design work.
Oh no, that's terrible advice.
Like someone will bring it up, and you have to be able to defend your choice.
Is that like saying that if you make a choice, you better make it count?
Like there should be either a reason for it or a reason that you didn't do something else.
But see, I feel like telling students that like you should always think of a reason why you chose a certain path is different advice than you should always defend your choice.
Well, I mean it from the perspective of it's teaching the students to think about it from the perspective of the reader.
Or the client in the case of a design thing.
Yeah, or the client. Like, just expect to have your choices questioned when you're making the work in the first place, and it actually, like, puts you a little bit ahead of the curve so that you're not waiting for them to tell you what you did wrong. You're automatically thinking, what are they going to say if I do this? And you're thinking how you can best impress your client, essentially.
Yeah, that was something that they taught us in art school. That was something that they really imprinted on us. But hang on, getting my thoughts together. But it's also like if you have a reason for what you're doing and what the design choices or like the story choices that you make, and then if you can bring those up, you can also like get more feedback that way where it's like, oh, I wanted to express the emotion of sadness, and then if you're working with someone who is willing to bounce back and forth on ideas with you, they could be like, oh, sadness, okay, have you thought of trying this then? That might be more efficient. And it's all part of like the collaboration process.
I think that also sort of brings up the point that like, because a lot of the growth that you guys mentioned was partially because it was like in exchanges with other people. I think it's probably good to sort of point out what a lot of people are afraid of, which is bad advice from mentor figures, peers, beta readers. Like, I think a lot of people are afraid of trusting someone with helping with their growth because they're afraid of being led on the wrong path. And I totally get that. There's definitely a lot of bad editors out there. Or not even necessarily bad editors, but editors that edit in a certain mindset. Like they edit the works as the editor they work for would want, instead of trying to edit the works in a way that is to bring out the author's voice. So like, how did you guys feel when people, not necessarily me, but like, I guess a lot of your experience is probably me in this case, but how did you feel when someone was really starting to ask you these like questions that you had to essentially decide to either defend or accept that you didn't have like a valid answer for?
I think I've never had that much experience with editors. I was very fortunate that, so I did a book with Iron Circus called The True Funeral on pre-order now.
Yeah, definitely pre-order that shit. It's great.
Yeah,
Do it.
Emily Risbeck is an amazing writer. They just plugged me in their live stream that ended before this one's, like right when this one started. But yeah, when the editor I worked with and my writer, they were very open, and they treated me like the authority on how it should look, and it was really nice. I got a couple notes, but mostly I just kind of got to do what I wanted. So as much as I really enjoyed that, I looking back, I thought I'd probably learn a little bit more about editing, other than what the editor's doing, other than what I learned from print, because I mean that was really helpful to learn all about the print stuff. But other than that, yeah, the most constructive criticism I guess I got was from Issa.
I'm sorry if that was no fun.
I will say this again and again. I don't mind it. Actually, it was nice to sit there and think about it, where I wasn't lost in a stream of, do I even know what I'm doing?
Yeah, it's nice to sort of sit down and think about the idea, but without the voice of self-doubt, just having someone be like, but could you think about it? And your brain is kind of like, I could, instead of thinking about it when you like feel bad. Like, often when I think about if my writing is good, it's usually like in the throes of feeling like my writing is bad, so it's not necessarily like an objective point of view.
As far as like how we reacted to being told like, hey, like you need help or whatever. So I had a narcissistic parent, and I had a very skewed frame of reference for things that were and were not appropriate to say growing up. And
you too?
I had to
Same
learn.
hat.
Oh my goodness.
I had to learn from like a very young age how to judge criticism before I let it touch me, essentially. So like, you know, if my dad was complaining about the way I dressed or did my hair, like first it had to hit a wall of, do I care, before I would let it affect me. And you know, like I learned to tell like what is valid criticism and what is not, like where is it coming from. And when Izza pointed out that I needed help, it did not strike me as her trying to tear me down. It struck me as her trying to help. And, you know, first of all, that was probably like one of the few instances I had at that point where like someone legit was just trying to help when they offered criticism. But I'm very glad I took her up on her offer for help.
Allie, I'm in the exact same boat.
A very important skill, especially if you're going to be online with people leaving comments left and right, and it's a lot of the ones you get, they're offering criticism from a place where they don't actually have anything useful to tell you a lot of the time, and it's like, I don't know who you are, I don't know your work, and I didn't ask for your opinion.
I mean, my favorites are definitely like the emails that Meg Severin gets, which are like, hey, your writing's pretty good, but maybe you should let me do it. Signed random dude. I don't
really offer my email up for the general public. Like, I don't want to get those messages because I will go off on people.
Boy, I can't wait to hit the big time to get these kind of emails.
No, you don't.
Man, like we like, I'll be frank with everybody. Like, Hive has its own little section of Discord where we make fun of these emails.
we have to process somehow, and to be fair, they are very funny. They are
the entitlement.
Yeah, some of these people are jerks. My favorite bad criticism emails are definitely people who are like, I've noticed that your comic is full of women, but you're not really writing them good. See, they should be submissive. And it's always like, ooh, to the trash pile with you. But first, I'm gonna like make a photocopy and share it with everybody.
Oh my god.
Just dunk them in the trash.
I'm sorry you didn't get a boner.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was no gender disclaimer in the email, but I think it's a safe assumption. There's someone in the chat pointing out that we also had a lot of critique about how many queer people there was in Namesake, because they were saying that it was unrealistic. And
it's
like
a gay comic.
Yeah, it's also a comic about space wizards, like, just saying.
And also, like, I don't know who these people hang out with, but when I was in high school, pretty much all of my friends were gay, bi, or ace, so maybe you just aren't hanging around the right people.
Is this a boring call out? Is this what this is? Yeah, boring.
It's like, even when queer people don't know themselves, they gravitate towards people that like, know them. Like, what I'm trying to say is that we flock together.
Yeah, when you have one friend that's like, it's so weird that I'm the only straight girl in this group of gay people, everybody's sort of just like,
Yeah, there's never.
Are you really?
Are you
Never
sure?
A token gay person. There's always a token straight person. That's just how it is.
For now. But yeah, before we diverged into like unwanted opinions, you were saying, Ellie?
Forgot what I was talking about before that.
Blah blah blah. The
sorry.
difference between unsolicited advice and advice that
Oh.
actually asks before being given.
Yeah, you should definitely ask for giving any sort of advice. And it did feel like Isa was trying to help, and like she wanted me to do better, and like she knew I could do better. And it just didn't feel like someone trying to tear me down to make themselves feel better. And
I definitely don't have enough free
that's why I
time to
decided
do
to
that.
trust-
I don't have the free time to tear people down to feel better. I got work to do.
It's so easy to tear other people down. Like, there are whole websites dedicated to tearing down webcomic artists who are just, living the dream because fuck them, right?
Oh, they worked really hard to make something that they really loved. Fuck them.
Should be ashamed.
Nice comment you got here. Would be a shame if something happened to it. Oh man, but yeah, unsolicited advice. That I feel like that's like a big, sort of tapping into like people who give bad advice or like lead artists like on a bad path. That is definitely like a big one. I feel like a lot of people also, especially on platforms like Webtoons, where the comments are like, let's say, briskly moderated at best, and an absolute avalanche of opinions. I feel like a lot of people also feel that even if comments don't have like unsolicited advice, they kind of feel like they have to sort of like go with what the readers want a little bit.
I had Far to the North on Webtoons for a couple of weeks right before Hiveworks picked it up, and the only comment I remember getting was, "It's not long enough." And I'm like, well, thank you for that. That's so helpful.
Oh God.
I think some comments people tend to leave. They like to leave. This is just my experience. A lot of awkward comments that I get tend to be very poorly veiled sarcasm. I had this one person who I thought was trying to tear apart my comic, and I just kind of ignored it. And then after a while, I realized, oh, they're trying to be funny. Bless them.
If it's on your website, they're trying to be funny at your expense on your own platform. Then they need to.
Mean.
An attempt was made.
They were just being kind of pedantic, and
it's still like the wrong way to go about that.
Yeah, but I try to be a little flexible because, I've had my time of being a very awkward kid on the internet, age 13, socially isolated and ADHD up the wazoo. I had my share of being a goon, not like a foreign goon. Just I've said charmless things while trying to be social, but it's just the weird sarcasm that people don't pick up on. And again, that's the fill in the blanks that people aren't seeing.
It's just one of the follies of the internet that inflection doesn't carry through text.
Yeah.
I think since we're in the last lap, so I kind of wanted to do a little lightning round with a question. So, right now you're like a more mature creator. You guys all have a couple things under your belt. You feel like you've learned a lot. If you could sort of go back in time and talk to younger you, or any young creator that you feel has the same issues as you, like now, since the landscape is so different just a decade later in webcomics. Like, if you went up to a creator that was like a baby you, and you had like 20 seconds to give them like the only advice that they're going to get this year about how to improve their story, what would you tell that person?
I would literally give myself a list of the books I bought, because the programs and the hardware I use, those things became available like around the time I got them. So it's not like those would have helped me getting them earlier or anything. But the books would have helped immensely to let me hit the ground running by the time I started drawing digitally.
Have you considered putting a list of those books just on Twitter?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think maybe you could straight up do that. Like, if that's the advice you want to give young creators, you could straight up make a list and explain why each one of these books was useful to you.
You can do that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
What about you, Misha? What would you tell like a small baboo that needs help?
Ooh, ask for help when you need it, and do your best to find resources that work. And I I don't know how to condense so much into like 30 seconds. I'm such like a long-winded advice person.
Well, I mean, I think ask for help is a good one. You should probably be like, here's my email. Would be actually.
Oh, definitely.
I think that would be the fast. That would be the fastest way. Like, this is my email. If you need help, call me. I think that's the thing I did the most when I was starting out, and I think that it's just handing my email to people would be like, look, if you need help, just here you go. What about you, Helen? What would you go up to like a small baby artist and be like, this is the thing you should know the most right now?
Well, if it's a baby artist that's not me, I would give them advice about, being as self-indulgent as possible. But if I was talking to my past self, nothing would get through to her. It's like, you're on your own, kid. You'll figure it out. I would just tell her, like, hey, maybe don't associate with so-and-so and so-and-so because they're trouble and they're going to give you a lot of grief. Bye.
I mean, I feel that's...
Like,
yeah. I feel like that distinction is actually interesting because, like, that's a point that I like to bring up too, is that sometimes when younger creators or older creators that are also still learning, it's not necessarily the younger ones that are in the learning curve, but I feel like there's a lot of people that they have to make their own mistakes and that's how they learn. Some people will take help and some people will learn really well in books or through a mentor figure or something like that. But some people, like, before they take help or even no help involved at all, that's just their learning process, they kind of have to slam right into the wall and just...
That's kind of... Sorry.
No, go ahead.
That's kind of how I learn. I feel like it takes a certain way for me to learn something, but once I learn it, I become an expert at it. That's why people will call ADHD like a superpower and a hindrance is, oh no, I feel like I'm not meeting this potential that I should because ADHD is in the way, but when I'm very interested in something, I think I can become a wizard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way.
Feels good, right?
Yeah. It feels like I'm so powerful that God had to nerf me.
Yeah. It's balancing out. God balanced out in a patch note, so we're not taking over the world. We're just chaotic.
On the one hand, I do enjoy being chaotic, and on the other, damn it, I want to rule the world.
Yeah.
It would be so much work, though.
But it'd be fun.
We could just, chill and draw comics. And you want to do all that work.
Well, how about I leave it to someone who can actually do the job, and then I just have enough resources that I can sequester away in a cabin with 20 cats in my comics.
You're the idea person.
I know I could do the job. It's just a matter of how lazy I am.
So, last little question for the chat. So, like, let's talk about, like, who is your senpai? Like, who is this person that represents to you, like, the ideal creator, this person that you strive to become or use as a constant inspiration? Who's the senpai that you want to have notice you?
Oof. Can I say you, Issa?
Ideally someone else, though. That's very flattering.
Aww.
Thank you. But I think that'd be more interesting for the chat if you said another human being.
Oof. Let's see.
Fobs.
Fobs.
I don't know how to pronounce
Oh,
that, but it
Fobs!
looks like Fobs.
Yeah, the Russian artists.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's amazing.
They're pretty good. They wow. Yeah, indeed. I agree.
I guess I would say.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay, I guess I would say Gigi because their work
Yes.
got me to restart Parisa, because I had come up with Parisa before, and I was just kind of, I started reading Cucumber Quest, and I was like, well, they can do it. Why can't I do it? You know,
Oh, entirely, yeah.
But ultimately, I try not to latch onto, you know, the senpai thing, because I spent a lot of my life, you know, narcissistic parents and other family members. I spent a lot of my life trying to fit in a certain mold that I thought was expected of me, until I realized, I'm not getting anywhere until I just try to reach my own potential, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely have a couple of friends that a couple of friends and colleagues that have made it with their webcomics and have made it their full-time job, and those are definitely the people that I look up to, and I'm really flattered that and really happy that, you know, we are able to work together, and I just and it just lights a fire under my ass of if they can do it, so can I. Let's go.
I feel like the senpai I have is the Full Metal Alchemist creator.
Yes.
I mean,
oh
I guess.
My god, yes, I love Himuro Arakawa so much.
It feels like maybe a weird senpai, but she makes so much comics, and it's always on topics that she's really passionate about her personally. And at some point in Full Metal Alchemist, when she was doing the last chapter, one of the little descriptors that she added to the chapter was I had to draw this final chapter, which is twice as long as the other ones, plus the cover, and I was also giving birth at the time. It's just what the hell, lady?
Crazy.
She has 3 or 4
She
kids.
look bad.
She's so good at weaving stories.
Yeah, the paneling is amazing. The characters are is amazing. The inking is amazing. The negative space is good. She's just driven and cool and making 5 series at the same time while giving birth to multiple children and keeping them fed and dressed and happy. It's
God damn.
lady.
Your mom.
Yeah, it's just I want this comic artist to be my mother, please. I just want the
Adopt me,
please. That's definitely my I want to be a person that is so available and giving and talented that when you look at my stuff you're hell yeah, this is Arakawa business. This is the same level, and to really feel sort of this person that's really she's also really critical of manga schedules and how people expand series. One of the reasons why Full Metal Alchemist is 21 books is because they were hey, this is really popular, you could keep going. She's nope, my story's 21 books. And they're but you could totally keep going. And she's yeah, but my story's 21 books.
Mm-hmm. I love creators like that, with Gravity Falls, where keep going, and Alex Hirsch is just nope, this is the story I wanted to tell, we're good, peace.
See, that's the sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I have so much respect for people like that.
That's a reason why I don't like ongoing Cape comics very much, because they don't actually get a story shape. They just get loosely associated stories that have to do with this one character, and sometimes crossovers. But it's so hard for me to get into a story that I feel I don't know when this is going to end.
That's true. That is, I mean, it depends on the story. Some of them, I just got into the TV series BoJack Horseman because I couldn't watch something that was so depressing and raw unless I knew kind of how it ended. If I was watching this live through everything that the character was going through, I think I wouldn't have been able... It would have
been a lot, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to appreciate as well as I did. Whereas as soon as I knew it was over and I kind of like checked out what the ending was, like I spoiled myself to be like, okay, this is something I can actually handle. And I did.
I just don't actually ruin anything. That's
No. Because even if you know how it ends, you don't know how it's like delivered.
Yeah. It's not death, it's what it takes to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can definitely see that for a lot of stories, that not knowing how the ending just doesn't entice you to read it. But other ones, I don't care. Other ones, I'm like, yes, pretty good. And I'm like fully into it as it goes, like webcomic, continuous publishing, doesn't matter. But I can definitely like see, like, there's some stories I have to see how it ends first, because I don't know if I can commit otherwise. Or like if it's going to turn into One Piece or something.
Oh god.
I've
Yeah.
absolutely read the last page of a book before deciding to read the beginning of it.
I mean, same. I do that all the time. Sometimes I'll read a chapter in the middle just to be like, oh, all right.
Nobody got time for this.
I want to see what I'm investing my energy in. I guess, yeah, someone suggested, oh, it's actually Megan. Megan suggested that we do an entire podcast just on endings that suck. I mean, interesting. Yes, definitely a good topic. All right, I guess the hour is up. So thanks for everybody who tuned in. Like I said before, this is the 6th panel in our weekend of panels here at Hiveworks. We've got 8 total. We've got 2 tomorrow, 1 at 1 o'clock and 1 at 3 o'clock, I believe. Just gonna look up the information real quick. Yeah, so 1 o'clock, we've got, this is 1 o'clock Eastern time. We've got What the Heck Does an Editor Do All Day? So, like, if you kind of like sort of like the little bit that we brushed on with editorial help here, you can learn more about editors and, you know, how we work with creators, how we work with agents and companies and stuff like that. It's going to be me and a couple of editors at Hiveworks to talk about that. And at 3 o'clock tomorrow, we have World Building Nopes, which is also pretty fun. So if you like chats about the creative process, definitely join in for that. Again, as a reminder, we have a store sale going on in Hiveworks, 10% off spring 2020. If you like what we were talking about, a lot of the books that we have are available in the store. So Ellie's Persephone book is available in the store. Definitely get that. We're going to have a sale for Persephone specifically pretty soon too. So if you want to hold off and wait for the beautiful bonus content that's going to come with that sale, definitely hold on to your hats for that too. Misha, who is here, woohoo!
Hello.
Misha, who is here, currently has a Kickstarter going for Alice in Nightmare Book 1. Definitely check that out too. Again, if you're watching in the Twitch, all the links are below. And if you're not watching on the Twitch, check out Hiveworks' Twitter for links. And again, check our Twitter generally for sales, information about comics, other panels that people are giving this weekend digitally. So we have like the Iron Circus panels, PajamaCon also happening, so definitely check that out. And to sort of, sorry? Yeah, buy Ellen's book. It's Your Funeral by Iron Circus Comics. Definitely pre-order that. The more pre-orders you do, the more the book sells in advance, and that is like very important to determining if a book is going to get awards and stuff like that. So definitely do pre-orders. It might not seem like it's helping, but it is. It helps books deal with like awards and orders to big chain stores a lot. So definitely tackle that.
So I can buy more candy.
Yeah, we need candy, you guys. We're poor and hungry. Come on. So thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. And we will see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.